her quit. Whoa, we're back. We are live. Coach's Corner, another week, every Thursday at noon Central out here. I am joined. You guys know who my special guest is today, the ocean expert. That's what I'm going to refer to Mr. Steve Ferreira as. It's just the ocean guy at this point because he's definitely somebody who I follow all the time. Every single day, I check out his posts out there on LinkedIn to find out really what's going on. And before we jump into our little introduction here, I got to give a shout out to my friends over at Steve Ferreira. You guys, they're on a mission right now to connect the logistics industry with a flat fee for unlimited EDI messaging. Carriers and owner-operators alike, you are costing yourself business by not having a digital option to accept tenders from your customers. With the Load Accept platform, EDI is no longer an expensive and unattainable option for companies who may not have a legacy TMS to utilize for your day-to-day operations. Load Accept levels the playing field for your organization and makes you EDI compliant with your customers through automation. If your customers are requiring you to have EDI capabilities, you now have a seamless and effective tool to utilize in Load Accept. If you're ready to learn more, visit www.bitfreighter.com to request a Load Accept demo today. Just do me a favor, let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. They're big supporters of the show, just like my friends over at Emerge and Trucker Tools. They help keep the lights on, and they've been such an integral part of the growth of all of this stuff and throwing that support out there. So shout out to all of them. Shout out to Mr. Steven Tuttle. He is out here in Phoenix with me, and we're Steve, I don't know if you knew this, but Phoenix is going to be the Chicago of the West Coast for a freight hub, man. Phoenix is just blowing up for trucking companies and logistics companies and everything else.
That's very cool.
Yeah, man. My friend Rhonda Zimmerman, are you connected with her out there?
I am. Yeah, Dr. Zimmerman.
Great. She's in there. And then as always, you guys drop all comments and stuff in there in the chat feed. We'll check it out and answer questions as you go. So Steve, what's new, man? It's been a little bit. The last time you were on was during the Portpocalypse stuff. And it seems like nothing's improved, but ironically, it's out of the mainstream media now.
Well, I'll tell you, Chris, it's funny that we're joining you in, and thank you so much for having me today on the Freight Coach, and via StreamYard. I was on StreamYard last night. I did a 2-hour marathon, and I tell you, I wanted to go 12, but I couldn't do it. We're trying to get detention and demurrage invoicing improved for the beneficial cargo owner community on top of a Russia-Ukraine war. So, go figure. We're trying to, but it's guys like you and I that are, I think, affecting a lot of change here on the net and in the industry specifically. So really cool stuff you're doing.
I appreciate that. And same with you, man. I mean, going out there and, I like you got a new studio as well, right? It looks like you built something out there recently.
Right now we're in the temporary digs, but I contracted with one of the TV studio design team that does most of the national news and ESPN studios, and we'll have it set up in the next month or so. But it's really going to be killer visuals, for all the different media hits that Ocean Audit's participating in.
No, absolutely. I love it. I'm looking forward to that. My friend Andrew Teal, he's out there in the comments, the Joe Rogan of truck. Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Lauren Began, what's going on? Steve, I'm sure you're connected with Lauren, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we were chatting last night on my live stream.
Yeah. No, she's great. She's definitely. So demurrage dwell time, all this stuff with BCOs that you're talking about. What's going on with that? Because I know that is something that it seems like is at the White House level. They're talking about something along those lines about doing something, but it seems like there's always just a lot of talk.
Well, Chris, you have to look at this in different, I think, sound bites or chunks. I think the biggest problem, quite candidly, is beneficial cargo owners, importers, exporters have a real lack of void of information flow. Think about it, right, Chris? I mean, you're such an expert on the trucking side. You're able to give great advice. I am on the ocean side. Lauren does a great job with her ocean consulting. But I think most beneficial cargo owners get a lot of their information from the shipping companies themselves. And that's a very, very tough road to hoe, so to speak. And are they really getting the right information? And so, I saw a movie years ago, and the line goes in it, look, I may be persistent, but I just want to get the right information to the right people. And I think that's the MO right now, because there's a lot of bad information out there. And it started with the Biden State of the Union speech where, President Biden really seemed like he was going to go full-fledged after the ocean vendors, the alliances, and what they would call the cartels. So, I mean, we've got a lot to break down here.
No, definitely. I thought you were gonna call him the cartel
I almost
right away.
did. I almost
I
did.
know, I call
I
I
call
mean,
myself.
will go on record in saying that I believe that's exactly what it is it's organized, it's legal organized crime is what a lot of that shit is, and I'll put my words out there, in that because it just seems like I mean, it's surface level, again, and I know we touched on this the last time you were on surface level. It seems like, there's not a lot going on, but once you start peeling back the layers of it and you realize how deep those claws actually go into the overall supply chain, and it's like they want to sit there and, oh, the supply chain this, the supply chain that. There's about 6 companies who kind of control imports and exports coming in and out of the United States. So is it the supply chain or is it the people who are digging in their claws?
Well, I think you have to kind of, reel back a little bit. Cartel is actually a funny word, because I got started in the ocean trade back in 1982. And I think the one big thing is that these carriers, these 6 or 8 or 10 carriers that you're talking about, they all have limited antitrust immunity, which gives them
Mhm.
the ability to sit at a table, hypothetically, in the old days, right? You used to sit at conference tables and talk about operational planning, the market conditions, everything about except, rates. But like, hint, hint, wink, wink, what really goes on at the end of the day, it's an interesting byproduct. I mean, as I can still remember back in 82 when I started, maybe 3 or 4 years before I got started in the ocean industry. There were, I'm trying to say this in a nice way, but I mean, there were gentlemen in the ocean industry with bags of cash that would visit shippers and,
Mhm.
incentivize them. I remember living in Asia where, when I was living in Taiwan, where one of the ocean vendors gifted, quote unquote, an exporter, like $50,000 of prize koi fish. So, I mean, a lot of games happened in the past. The industry is a bit antiquated. And that's one of the things that I try to promote in my work at Ocean Audit is that, really we have ships, we have ports, we have cranes, we have trains, but we haven't had the kind of causal improvement, the incremental improvement that we might have had, perhaps in your industry or in, telecom or whatever. So, did a study on LinkedIn, and I think we've talked about this before, but there were a couple 100,000 people in the US in ocean logistics, supply chain. And out of that, 10, 15% of them, were in new roles in the last 90 days. I call them
Mhm.
mavericks, right? Where these folks, men and women, have the chance to affect real change and to make real motivational, aspirational changes in their organization. Because, you've got a bunch of guys, God bless the CFOs, the CEOs, the controllers of the world that are controlling the purse strings of these large, importers, exporters, e-commerce companies. But at the end of the day, the budgetary pressure is really being put on the supply chain and logistics. And you may have somebody that, is relatively new in logistics trades, controlling potentially 2, 3, 400 million dollars in spend. So they've got to get the right information to the right people and have all those silos kind of talk together, Chris. And I think that there's a big void in that in ocean freight. I'd say, in my professional opinion, probably only, I'm probably gonna catch some heck for this, but I'd say only about 25% of beneficial cargo owners are set up properly.
That's okay. Yeah. I mean, again, there's a lot to unpack on what you're talking about right there. And when you're talking about that 15, it was 15% are new, essentially new people in
Right.
the industry. Yeah, controlling that. I mean, that happens on the full truckload side as well. Like it's some of
Gotcha.
these large 3PL, 4 whatever PL they're up to at this point. I think they're up to like fucking 9 PL at this point. Whatever one of those guys is like there are literal load planners who have 6 months or less of experience, and they're controlling the
Totally.
freight tendering process for some of the largest shippers in North America. And
Interesting.
again, it's like, hey, I'm not saying that they're not trained properly to do the job, but it's like that's a lot of risk, I think, in there. And again, it's like I'm not a fan of regulations and rules per se, but I understand implementing the right processes and structures for people to follow because especially we're in a time that we're in right now. Like there are a lot of variables, a lot more than normal that are being thrown at our supply chain. And again, then I talk about this a lot, Steve, kudos to everybody who's out there because no matter what anybody wants to say, shit's still moving. Like goods are still moving, and that's a testament to the hardworking men and women of this industry overall. And Mark Groves is in the audience again. Mark, what's going on, man? Gen 2 of Port TMS. Check those guys out as well. Got to give a shout out to my friends over at Port. My friend Andrew Teal, he's got a question for you, Steve. How large is June 30th looming on the horizon? What's your feeling on the likelihood of labor issues on the docks and the ports? And if all that happens, how long does it last?
Well, I'm sorry. What's the first name of your
Andrew
comment?
Teal.
Andrew, thank you for that question, and Chris, thanks for relaying that from Andrew. I know what he's getting at with regards to the ILWU collective bargaining agreement. It's really interesting. If you go to the ILWU's website, there's actually a lawsuit right now that the ILWU is trying to tamper down. And it has to do with, if the minute the longshore worker walks into the union hall, they considered working, for the employer, or are they not? And it seems like a minor issue, but it's turning into a major litigation. And you can go to the ILWU website and read about that. Now, that's a minor issue. I shouldn't make hay of it. It's a major issue for the ILWU because they're fighting the suit about the regulations of when do you become a worker for the employer, the Pacific Maritime Association. So I guess my answer to the question is, if the ILWU is concerned about when the clock starts as an employee relation, I think I misjudged the situation on the July 1st date. I assumed that the Biden administration would step in and have some chops to control that. I may have misread that situation. I think we're in for quite an awakening, and that this settlement will not come easy. I thought it might. I thought that of everything that we've been through on Containergeddon, that we might see some relief. But these ILWU negotiators are probably the toughest in the world. So we definitely are going to see, I think, a major, if not a slowdown or a stoppage, but another mini chapter of Containergeddon. And that's why, Chris and Andrew, we already see, in my humble opinion, a lot of forward loading to the East Coast, and that's why you're starting to see more ports getting displaced on the East Coast, with more holding time and more vessels sitting outside these so-called loitering areas. I think those in the know are starting to pre-plan to get away from the West Coast.
Yeah, it's and then for furthermore, if anybody wants to check that out, I dropped the website in there. Sorry, apparently I can't post this directly to LinkedIn, but it's www.I as in Isaac, L as in Larry, W as in William, U as in umbrella.org. Check it out there. That's the website Steve's talking about. Andrew Teal says thank you for that. Sorry again, LinkedIn user, your settings are set to private, so it shows LinkedIn user. Whomever put the comment, our supply chain is so out of whack and the administration is doing nothing that would help. Yeah. So, and then go ahead, Steve.
Well, the comment from the private viewer is really interesting. I have to say, I thought that I had some conversations with President Biden's press secretary, Jen Psaki. I tried to get John Porcari on my show a couple of times, and Lori LaRocco did have him on CNBC. But one of the things that's really interesting is that kind of port ambassador position that John Porcari was leading is went away, and John's kind of disappeared, and that position might be going back to DOT, which is kind of a weird place for it. So we have another void here, and I have to kind of give some sympathy to your the question that came up, because I really feel that the administration has turned a bit of a blind eye to any more problems in the ports and ocean chain.
And Steve, and I talked about this on like the little port apocalypse thing, and again, this isn't me completely blaming the current administration, because every administration is guilty of this, is causing something to pass some form of legislation, and I feel like the infrastructure bill needed to be passed, and the optics of everything at the port was very clickbait worthy. It was very newsworthy. And all of a sudden you saw a lot of those middle of the aisle politicians jump on board with it to push that legislation through, and they got what they want, and all of a sudden they're gone. And that's my personal feelings on it. And this isn't just me saying, like, this is establishment politics at its finest right there. That happens nonstop. It's not just the current administration who's guilty of that. But I don't disagree with that statement at all, that because there's a lot more that can be done. And it seems like it's out of sight, out of mind. It seems like there's something like, again, the timing of a lot of current events right now. Like, I try not to put on a tinfoil hat too much, but it's kind of hard not to wear a tinfoil hat in today's day and age and put a lot of these situations to light. I just think that there needs to be more of an emphasis on it. And I talked about this during the Port Apocalypse series as well. We should be investing into our ports. We should have, in my opinion, America should be the top tier, the gold standard for infrastructure. I feel like our ports should be number one in the world. Our airports, our freeway system, everything should be number one in the world. We need to invest in our infrastructure. I agree with that, but not at the, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. There has to be more of a concentrated effort on actually making these improvements, and then not just talking about it and then fucking pulling everything back.
We seem to be good, Chris. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think Americans, I've lived in Asia, I've lived in Europe, right? So I would say to you, okay, hey, Chris, let's you and I go to Rotterdam. I want to show you the most modern, mechanized, automated terminal in the world. Chris, let's go to Tokyo. I want to show you what the Japanese have come up with, in terms of an operational plan. But I think what it comes down to at the end of the day is that there's no more creative souls collectively on earth than Americans, right? I don't want to come off now here as kind of like jingoism here, but I mean, the reason why you and I are doing what we're doing is, we're entrepreneurial, we're creative, we're souls that think out of the box. We're not afraid to put it out there. And Americans do that real well. And a lot of problems get solved by that great flow of creativity, which makes up for the sucky infrastructure that's out there. I totally agree with you. Chris, I've looked at Business Insider. They have these polls, the 10 most, the 100 best airports in the world. You'd be hard pressed to find an American airport on there, right? And it's the same thing with ports. Our productivity is really, not nowhere near as good as the Chinese, but it's our ingenuity and our consumerism and our thirst and our drive and our zest and our zeal and our intellect that make up and give us the best country in the world and with the most volume. And that's the reason why these ocean vendors are making $200 billion a year, is because of the American factor. And so I agree with you. There's got to be a way. Now, I will say, and maybe we save it for a different question, I do think there's a lot of stuff coming down in ocean because of the Department of Justice actually getting involved in a lot of maritime matters. We're going to see a lot of scared sea-level guys at the ocean vendors, because these DOJ guys, they don't mess around when it comes to investigating whether there's price hikes or detention demurrage practices. So it's still a lot to play out here.
No, definitely. We'll get to that. I want to talk about that. We'll get to that. I gotta give some more shout outs here out in the audience. Lauren Began, she's out there. Great thoughts here, Steve. Everyone's holding their breath a little, it seems. She's a little nervous and wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of disruption. Stephen Peterson, what's going on, man? How are you? Rhonda, we behind the times on many things. I would agree with that, Rhonda. We are behind the times on a lot of things over here. William Bates, what's going on? And then again, the LinkedIn user, if you could identify yourself, I'm sorry, your privacy settings are up there. A branded tinfoil hat would be hilarious, actually. A branded hat. That's exactly what I should put on when we start talking about a lot of this. But, to your point, Steve, I think that, and if you did watch the State of the Union address, it seemed that Biden kind of changed his tune a little bit on a lot of things to kind of put that pro-America, America first narrative out there. And I don't want to say it's because, of a certain altering event that's going to be happening in November. I don't want to make that correlation to think that that's why the messaging switched due to certain numbers that affect that event from happening. But I feel like there is nothing. Todd Waldron, gosh dang it, change your privacy settings. Todd's a friend of mine. He's out there. He's at Q Carriers out in Shakopee, Minnesota. You guys connect with Q Carriers as well. Connect with Todd. Todd is great. He's been on my show a couple of times and everything, very insightful. But, I think that, again, back to that and putting that America first narrative back out there. I want to see that. Like, we can do it better here. Call it my American arrogance, but I believe that we are the greatest nation on earth, and we should be not as reliant on other countries for our basic things, like, everything that's going on with, and I know, like, the oil production in Russia and everything else is, but like, we should be completely dependent on America for America. All right. I'll say it. I don't care if I catch any shit for saying that. I'm just a firm believer that we can do it better here, and we should look at it. We should look at bringing more of this stuff back here.
Yeah, and I really want to echo that thought. I actually, I'll tell something public today that I've been having these private thoughts on over the last 2 weeks or so. It's going to be tough for me to pull off. I mean, I guess it could be done. But I was even thinking of toying with the idea of approaching the administration and coming up with, like, for example, the American agricultural steamship line, maybe a small feeder or some kind of vessel that's dedicated for export only. I think the administration might offer some subsidies there, and it might be a pipe dream on my part, but I would love to pull off something where we bring in a niche service, for example, to help the farmers, to help the American exporters, because frankly, they ain't getting on the boat right now at these rates. The rates are not, compensating enough, and the ocean vendors want that quick turn back to Asia to pick up the consumer loads. But I'd love to start a mini ocean line that would help American agricultural.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, again, anything to bring it back down to that blue collar level, man. I mean, I'm blue collar through and through, and I want to see that again, man. It's like, that's what, not to get too off topic, but it's like the real reason why we were able to keep moving as a country over these last 2 years. It wasn't, and again, I'm not here to knock on any professional athletes or celebrities, but it wasn't for them. It was for the truck drivers. It was for the farmers, the warehouse workers, the blue collar people kept this country fucking going. And there needs to be a re-emphasis on that. And, and like, in listening to the State of the Union, it seemed like that was a thing. But again, enough of the talk. And that's what I hate the most about these last 6 months and everything with the ports and everything else. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of clickbait worthy things. There's a lot of people who are getting their fingers in who literally have not the slightest fucking clue about this stuff. And I'm no expert when it comes to ocean freight or anything else, but I can look below surface level and see that, well, this just doesn't make sense. If this company is in control of more than just the ship, they're in control of a lot of shit. And if there was a crisis that could happen from that, it wouldn't be that hard to send down the ladder, essentially.
Yeah, Chris, it's funny. I have a really good friend that's a senior guy at one of the Fortune 100 companies. He's heads up their logistics team, and he had I had done a live cold read on air on LinkedIn about what Biden was going to talk about as it relates to the supply chain. And he said, Steve, it was really interesting how, I really appreciated what you read. And I thought to myself, I don't know if my friend was being facetious, because there were times where I started to, crack up and just laugh. And I actually said, that's not going to, I mean, I would actually make comments as I'm reading what the White House is saying is happening. And I thought to myself, what universe are they living on? This is just not reality, And unfortunately, because we don't have that core expertise deep into the American persona, the American people end up buying it. And you're right. I mean, anything that came out of the administration on the ports was basically 100% bullshit.
Yes. Yeah. I appreciate you being so blunt, Steve. There's that East Coast attitude coming out. I love it.
Yeah. I know. You can let my hair down here. It's my new hair gel.
Oh man.
That
is great.
No, I seriously, I just it does get into my skin, where you think about and the FMC had brought on this 36 importers and exporters, kind of like a shipper advisory group. And some really big names, some really senior guys that are, trying to help the FMC look at policy. But again, that group has gone quite silent. And so, it's like I'm a little concerned about where the leadership is, and I think I mentioned this to Lauren before, is, I think that, you're great on your side of the transportation and trucking side, and Lauren on maritime, me on maritime. But if you think about it, Chris, I don't know how many. There's probably just a few hundred of us, maybe less, that lend our voice out as frequently as you and I do. Maybe 100 people. And if you think about 100 people, and there's like 1 million in the industry, we need more of a grassroots. And I think that I know that on my side, and I hope you would feel the same way, is like, getting this recognition that, we're trying to enhance the lives and businesses of our followers and the people that are looking and listening to us right now. I'm starting to see some great results from that. And I think that the more that we get into the grassroots, the more it's going to be great for America and for our listeners.
No, I agree with that. And again, it's like, that's the whole point in all the content that I put out there, Steve, is it's education based. It's bringing it's dissecting the corporate fluff or the messaging that was out there on what is actually happening. It's just like, my business partner in a new venture I have, brokercarrier.com. The guy's a genius when it comes to IT. So I don't know it, but he can break it down in plain English for me, so I understand. Like, an API is essentially, plugging a toaster into a wall and it just gives each other power. But that's that's what's needed though, is you can't speak at, and the statement that I fucking hate more than anything is the 10,000 foot overview. You can't speak at that level ever. Like, we got to break it down to 101 style information so people actually understand, so they can take this. And, and to bring up your point about the current administration and the ports and everything else. And it's like, we need to be able to, like, the grassroots movement needs to be able to go to our elected officials and tell them exactly what's wrong. And they need to take that information and do something about it. And that accountability, and this is something that I've been speaking about a lot, Steve, is there's a massive accountability thing missing in this country right now. A massive accountability. It was my initial thoughts with everything at the port. It was kicking the can down the road. It was smoke and mirrors, blaming everybody else. It's like, no. I think it would say a lot if anybody out there, an elected official or somebody, said, you know what, I fucked up. I'm going to work on that. I think that would hold a lot of weight with the American public.
Yeah, I think it's a lot like, we see the patient getting sick over time, and, we bring this patient to various specialists and doctors to try to diagnose them. And the diagnosis is very tough because it's a rare thing. And I'm referring to the supply chain and what all the breakdowns that we've seen. And when we finally get to the right kind of doctor or physician, it's almost like, well, this patient is very hard to revive as is, but we can bring them back, but it's going to look differently. And, there's going to be some different parts and some components. And it's almost like, we're way past the part of saving the patient now. And now we've got to kind of reincarnate the process, so to speak. And I look at the same way in the ocean freight level, is that we just finished the TPM meetings in California. Yeah. Contract rates are, just a record all-time high. Zim just came out yesterday with their earnings and a forecast for 2022 that looks even better and bigger than 2021. And this is very important for all the viewers out there today. Zim, Israeli company, one of the vessel operating common carriers, they're very, very, very conservative with their guidance, maybe even more conservative than Maersk Line. And for Zim to come out and give forward guidance that 2022 will be a better revenue year than 2021, it's gone underreported, Chris. And this is a huge thing because it shows kind of who's still driving the engine, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to give some shout outs here quick. My friend, the freight sensei, Scott Waddington. My brain works faster than my mouth sometimes, which is really crazy to see. Scott Watanabe. He's with sorry, I'm cracking myself up here. He's with Armstrong Transport Group out of Boise, Idaho. TJ, what's going on, brother? The strategy behind buying from other countries does give us leverage if things go where we can shut off our purchases of their goods. However, I think it could be less and help the American people more. Lauren, thanks for the shout out, Steve. For those of us here are very passionate about the industry. And William Bates, exactly, Chris. And then my friend Andrew Teal, accountability, agreed. Tell me the good news or the bad, just tell me the truth. Why did the truck not get there? Why are the ports doing X or whatever? I can handle bad news. I can't handle lies or BS. Just give me the truth and we'll figure it out. And then William Bates, exactly, Chris. And yeah, man, I just, I want to talk about, like with that ocean line, is that, to kind of tie back in your Department of Justice thing, you don't have to call it collusion. You don't have to call it price gouging, price fixing or anything else. But like with the DOJ starting to sink their teeth into all of this, how does that contradict or counteract anything that Israeli line said out there at that conference last week?
Well, I think, Chris, they have to, it's a complex industry. And I know that the FMC has already looked at or potentially opening some investigations into, I want to say it's Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd and one other carrier. So they started with 3 to look at, and they have always a long laundry list of things they want to see: service contracts, price lists, spot rates. So, the FMC can ask for a lot of different things. My big fear, my big concern is that the Biden administration wants to have some success here. And you get a hotshot, attorney at the DOJ that just wants to, thinks he or she has the right keys to the castle to make this all come crumbling down. And it's a very slippery slope, because here you have on one hand, the FMC commissioner, Dan Maffei, for example, saying that, hey, we don't really, we kind of want to keep the consortiums together. We don't really want to regulate the prices they charge. And then you had the Biden administration saying, well, they're making too much profit. So, if they break up the cartels or the alliances, it just puts us in a worse position, because then there could be additional consolidation of the industry, which could lead to even higher rates and pricing. But I think that if you're a vessel owner, a sea-level guy at one of the ocean vendors, you should be very, very afraid of the DOJ messing around in your backyard. I've seen these boys in action, and they shoot and they ask questions later.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like we need like the Southwest Airlines of the Sea to come up here. Fucking, if you want to early bird check-in, $20 here. If you want to pay for this, pay for that. Because again, it's like a lot of what you're talking about right there. It does kind of bring up, the airline industry in the United States current structure. There's 4-5 major players, and then there's like 3 semi-major players, and then that's really it for commercial aviation. And it sounds like, again, like, and to kind of tie in the full truckload thing, it was almost like that's what the deregulation was kind of designed for in the late 80s. I forget, in the 80s, when that all came about, was to break up any potential price fixing.
Well, I think that you see this a little bit now, these chess pieces moving around a little bit. And I don't know if it was coincidence, but back on Zimline again, Zim just came out a day or two ago, and they said, oh, hey, guess what? We're going to have this express service from Southeast Asia direct to Baltimore. And, it's a stroke of brilliance, because Southeast Asia is very underserved right now. It's very challenging for major exporters in the textile, garment, footwear industry to get reliable and consistent volumes out of Southeast Asia. And by Zim having this new ship, Zim can say to the DOJ or FMC, "Wow, look at us! We're fulfilling American business by giving the American business and America itself what they need: this express service to help take off some of the choke points." So it's a good thing on Zim's part. It's very innovative the way that they masked or claused this. I don't know if they were thinking along the lines of regulatory, but now that I talk myself through it, I'm almost convinced myself into it that, and again, this is just my own opinion, they could have potentially introduced that new service as a way to show the innovation. So I think it kind of goes both ways, but the shoe's been on the other foot for a long, long time now, though.
Yeah. When you're talking Southeast Asia, was that a direct reference to Taiwan and everything, or is there any other areas out there? Because again, I think like bringing that 101 style approach, the major ports in Southeast Asia, what would that really encompass overall?
Yeah, I think you're really looking at, for example, everyone's talking about China, and this new vessel is really excluding China. It's talking really about Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, the Philippines, that area, Singapore. It's challenging because a lot of people have moved their manufacturing there to avoid themselves of Trump tariffs, try to move away from China. But then when you try to book cargo out of those areas, it's very challenging. And then you end up with, $15,000 to $20,000 spot rates. And so I think by having this express service, this is actually, Zim's really interesting because, as I said, they've had incredible forward guidance. And certainly they looked at this vessel string rotation. We call it a string of introducing a vessel into service as I mean, I haven't stripped the numbers on it, but if I'm looking at this, on the back of a napkin, I'm going to say to myself, it's going to be probably one of the most, gross profit vessels in the world. Once this thing is running, it's going to be incredible. And here's the thing that is really interesting. Remember in the early days of the Biden port thing, where would you always see Biden or Buttigieg? At the Port of Baltimore. And they showcase Baltimore because Baltimore is kind of unique in a way that it has container traffic, but it's not been the name brand, or it's not been the port where everyone's focusing in to come in on first. Now with Zim doing it, hey, Baltimore to New York, Baltimore to the Southeast, it's no big deal. We'll get your trucker friends to to do those loads. But I mean, I think it's a masterstroke, and I have to. On one hand, I think the Zim is a really forward-thinking company. They've acted smart, but they still get lumped in with all the vessel owners that are just making these billions.
Yeah. Kind of want to pivot a little bit here, Steve, for the last 10 minutes or so about obviously the conflict that's going on in Russia and Ukraine. And with us, Biden, was it yesterday or was Thursday today? Was it yesterday or Tuesday that it was we're done importing Russian oil? How, with that announcement, how does that look to affect our supply chain here in the United States?
Well, it's interesting. I've done a lot of work on this Russian oil thing over the last couple of years, and in tandem with Lori and Larocco over at CNBC. And I was helping to feed Lori, a lot of intel on the Russian oil. We did see a pretty big Russian oil push. We can trace the containers, the tankers coming in. As a matter of fact, I showcased one of the last tankers coming into New Orleans last week for Valero Corporation. It had 300,000 or 400,000 barrels of Russian oil on it. I think that, traditionally, right, and Lars Jensen and a few other people, Peter Sands of BIMCO, Russia and Ukraine have really been about 1% to 2% of the kind of the seaborne trade. And when it comes to containers, even much less than that, very small blip. I think the idea here is that if we can somehow get the strategic reserves up to snuff and release them, Russia accounted for, I think, was it 7 million barrels a day. But I think that with some the American people looking to conserve, remember, China is still getting fostered and fueled by Russia. So that end of the pipeline is going to continue. So when it comes to American and consumer products that you need petrol and oil to produce, I don't see a diminishment. The only thing you might look out for is the American appetite for leisure goods still going to be as consumable as the consumption with inflation and higher pump prices?
It's funny when you break it down like that, Steve, into what I will call plain understandable English. Is it's like, okay, maybe us shutting off the Russian oil reserve, whatever, wasn't as big of a thing as we thought, if we weren't as reliant on that. And again, it's like, that's what I hate is it's like the information that's out there right now. There's just such a plain narrative, clear as day narrative behind what information is pumping out there. And it's like, then you have the other side are like, oh, turn the Keystone pipeline back on and this and that. And, I saw an interesting take on that this morning on LinkedIn. Somebody put down, they're like, hey, I understand the theory behind it, but they're like, at best, we're 6 months away. If they were like, turn it back on, we're 6 months from that being fully operational.
True.
And again, it's because it's like you got one side of the aisle who's like, oh, drill, baby, drill, turn the pipeline back on. Let's do this. It'll fix it tomorrow. but that's just not the reality. And I understand the rallying cry behind it. And again, I'm all about no independence on any other nation but our own to survive. But it's like, again, talking about the realities of it, and it's like to that point about the Russian imports not being as big as we'd like to think. Overall, it's kind of like, okay, well then where's the accountability for like who's pulling the levers on those gas prices right now? Because I know everybody out there's been affected by it.
Yeah, it's funny, Chris. They had a video interview of AOC, the congresswoman from New York, heading into a restaurant in the Capitol yesterday. And one of the questions that was thrown out at her is, what would you tell the American public about, the high price of gas? She wants obviously more of a greener environment. And I think that, it's really, a green environment's not obviously instantaneous. It's over a generation. But I think that what we have to really take into consideration here is that really Russian oil into the U.S., the banning of that, it may be more ceremonial, at best. I just don't see it as, one of a couple of years ago, yeah, they were doing some pretty serious barrels. But over the past 6 months to a year, what you're seeing more with the Russians is more of the naphtha, some of the byproducts, not the crude, right? The bubbling crude that we would use for facilitating, refining oil into gas. So it's interesting. Russia does import a lot of derivatives of oil, but not, we're not so dependent on them for the main crude.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of, that green initiative. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit I want to breathe cleaner air. I think we all do. I think if you all take it down to that, the surface level of it, I think we all could agree, like, yeah, I would love to not have so much pollution rolling around if that helps, me survive or whatever that is. But it's like with that green initiative, and I know Buttigieg made that comment yesterday. Oh, just buy an electric car. That will help you with the gas. What they don't talk about, though, is what it takes to actually manufacture. Like, it takes fossil fuels to create an electric car. You got to mine for that shit, like unless they have a earth mover that can be powered by solar panels that I'm not aware of right now.
Yeah, and it goes even further than that. I remember even 5, 6, 7 years ago in Europe, working with various major importers over there. Even 6, 7 years ago, I remember seeing invoices from shipping companies from Asia to Europe. And as part of the mandate over there in Europe, on the shipping invoice, it would be, the carbon offset cost on this container was, X in dollars. And it's like, I get it, right? We all want to do that. We all want to, kind of contribute to that, but, kind of not ready for prime time yet. And it's kind of the same way I think of, blockchain for ocean. It's like, it sounds great, but when you kind of undress it a little bit, it's got a little bit of some lag to it. So it's really interesting, some of the challenges that we have to face. And, remember, right, all those great new mavericks that are coming into logistics that we talked about earlier in your show, they're getting all these messages. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go with this global forwarder because they've got a great, cool digital display, or I'm going to go with, the old school guy because he's our contact, or I'm going to go with this company because, they're doing the best to go green. So it's really still, the logistics industry is so, it's the iceberg, right? And at the bottom, is all the guys at the bottom and very few at the top. It's a very disjointed industry.
No, I agree with that. I just wish there would be more real and raw conversations that take place to bring the reality of what it is. And, I'm just so over the fear mongering, Steve. I'm so over the fear mongering. I'm so over all of this shit on both sides of the fence here. This isn't just directed at any other part. It's the establishment, in my opinion. I'm sick and tired of it. I want to focus on moving our country forward in the right direction. I want to see things get back to the American values, to, for individuals like myself, amongst others who are just trying to live their American dream, who are sitting here day in and day out trying to build up their dreams and their legacies. And I want that brought back. I want to see all that shit brought back to the United States to make, and again, let me be very, very clear here. I am all about helping other people as long as we're taken care of first I know. And like, if you hate me for it, you hate me for it. But that's my thing. And if you break it down to your own home level, you're going to make sure your family's protected before you give out and protect anybody else. And that's the way that I view us as a country. We're a family. We have to protect each other. We have to help each other first and foremost,
Right.
and then reach out and help others, because we are the greatest nation on earth. We can do that, but we got to look intrinsically for a little bit, fix ourselves before we can fix others. Fuck, man, I'll use myself as a prime example. I had to stop boozing as much. I had to lose weight to fix myself before I could do any of this shit. You know, that accountability piece, that's something that needs to be brought back. That's what I want to see. I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but we're kind of wrapping up here. We're up on time. Steve, you're a very busy guy. I appreciate you, fucking mainstream media guy here who's on CNBC and everything else, comes out and hangs out with a little old freight coach for a little bit. I love it.
Oh, I love you, man. I love you. You always make me kind of let my hair down a little bit, and I feel very free. And you're so easy to talk to, and it's grassroots, baby, grassroots.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, I'm sure everybody who's out there right now, Todd Waldron, Trey, Rhonda, Andrew Teal, Lauren, everybody out there, William Bates, TJ, Scott Watanabe, the Freight Sensei, all of you guys who are out there, Steve Peterson, thank you guys all so much for tuning in and commenting on this. I'm sure you guys are all following Steve. If you're not, follow him. He is my ocean freight source besides Lauren Began. They're the two that I follow to get all the information I get. So
Thanks.
follow them as well. I appreciate you guys all so much, and we'll be talking to you guys soon.